Hello and welcome to the Green Voice podcast, where you're getting the dirt on sustainability here in Pittsburgh. My name is Grant Ervin with S&B USA. Excited to be here with all of you listening into the Green Voice podcast. Today, we're going to dive into an interesting topic, what I like to call the hard to decarbonize. And sorry for the marketing people about decarbonizing, but the hard to decarbonize sector. And one of the things that's been developing over the sustainability space in Pittsburgh here in recent years has really been the advancement of a lot of industrial companies stepping into sustainability and working on carbon reduction measures, as well as they're advancing their sustainability journey. And today we have with us Nick Bonarrigo from Carmeuse to dive into that topic. And I'm excited to listen and learn from Nick. Nick, how are you today?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me.
So it's good to have you here on the Green Voice and here in the Point Park Studios, the Center for Media Innovation. First, let's start the conversation. I'm really interested to learn. We've had a chance to meet a few months ago at the Earth Day Business Breakfast. Interested in kind of diving in first and learn a little bit about yourself and kind of your journey with Carmeuse.
Yeah, sure. So I guess my journey begins back in New York. That's where I'm from originally. Went to law school.
New York City or the state?
No, I'm from the city. I'm from Queens.
Queens.
Actually, absolutely.
Okay.
St. John's University. We're going to have a good basketball team this year, finally.
Coming back.
Oh, yeah. Well, we hired Rick Pitino, so we're going to be okay.
Okay, nice. Basketball's back in New York City?
Exactly. Oh,
All
it's
right.
going to be big.
That's Lou Carneseca?
Oh, yeah.
Am I right?
Lou's a great guy. And he's still alive, 99 years old.
Holy
if you can believe
cow.
it. And we talk about sustainability. 99 years is a sustainable life.
That's pretty good.
I love it. I know.
And then Chris Mullen, too, right?
Correct. He was
Okay.
our coach. Didn't work out so well. Much better as a player.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So St. John's,
Yes.
Queens.
And then went to law school and moved to Pittsburgh because I met a girl and this is where we settled. And
Okay.
we later divorced. But you know what? I'm still liking Pittsburgh, so I stuck around. Yeah.
Love is one of our biggest attraction tools here
Isn't
in
it?
Pittsburgh. I
It kind of brings you back home.
Whether it's a husband and wife, other types of partnerships.
Yeah.
I think it's funny to hear those stories where folks from outside of the Pittsburgh realm
yeah.
come to Pittsburgh because of love.
Yeah. And look, the truth is, I mean, if there's any love left, it's I fell in love with this city because
awesome.
I have left here. I've moved back here several times. I've had different opportunities take me different places in the world, and there really isn't a place quite like Pittsburgh. And I've been here now going on 15, 16 years.
That's amazing.
And to me, this is my home now.
I hope the Chamber of Commerce is listening.
Yeah, they should be.
Yeah.
Right? It is. No, it's a great place. I worked here at law firms for the bulk of my career. So
Okay.
I like to call it my selling out phase. So I did that for about 15 years at big firms.
Okay.
I had debt, I had responsibilities
Yep.
and wanted to make the money. So worked at, but look, it wasn't as bad as I make it sound. I mean, I got to work on some fascinating, awesome projects, huge clients. I got to travel the world. I got to spend time at an international firm where I lived in different places. We had offices all over, and I got to spend some time in the Middle East. I lived in Chicago for a bit, spent time in our offices in New York, LA, wherever. So my experiences were broad.
Nice.
And it's good to do that when you're younger. Get older, you sort of tend to...
The airports all start to look the same. And
Not in the Middle East.
Not
They're insane.
in terms of size and...
All of it. Brand new. I mean, if you go to the airports in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, actually, if you see the new Mission Impossible movie.
Not yet.
Yeah, so they filmed that in the Abu Dhabi Air Force, the airport, the new...
Really?
It's gorgeous.
Okay.
Absolutely gorgeous.
I'll have to take a look at that.
And fly through it if you can.
Well, hopefully the airport authorities listen to this
Yeah,
too.
exactly. See, sponsorship for the show.
That's right. That's
It's
what we're
all
looking
coming
for.
through. Yeah.
So your legal experience, was it in corporate legal work?
Yeah,
or?
so I did largely M&A.
Okay.
Outside general counsel work for companies. So corporate, commercial, completely.
Got it.
That's always been my background, and for a variety of companies. So some were industrial, some were financial type companies, private equity firms.
So you got to see like a broad base.
Everything.
Of
Everything that drives our economy, I think I got to participate in some fashion.
That's fascinating. Now, what was your journey then to Carmeuse to go inside to a company?
Yeah.
I'm always interested in that from
Yeah.
legal folks who work in a firm but then go in-house. And,
For sure.
And what's that like and why that transition?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of reasons, but I think a big part of it for me was you sort of start to feel cold doing the outside work. So, if you do an M&A deal, You do an acquisition, you get to know these people, you get to know your client, you get to know the target, and then you do the deal, and then you're on to the next deal. And so there's an integration, there's something that happens, but you're not part of that.
Right.
You're just going on to put the next
transactional.
Next group together. And it starts to feel cold the longer you get into doing this. I mean, and even a little bit repetitive, I would say.
Okay.
Because you're kind of doing the same deals over and over again. And look, there is a market
Rinse,
to this
wash,
thing.
repeat.
Yeah, and that's what you'll argue about. You'll say, well, that term's not market. And you're like, man, this is what I know in life. It's what is a market term in a purchase agreement.
Right.
And it doesn't, at the end of the day, feel as fulfilling maybe as other things.
That's interesting.
And so for me, I was looking, okay, well, what if I was on the other side of that equation? What if I was at a company, and if you do the acquisition, then you got to live with that acquisition. You gotta integrate it. You got to figure out how to make this other group of people become part of your culture and your team. It's a way different proposition and exciting for me.
Is it beneficial to carry a flag in that sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah, like you have a sense of enduring responsibility.
Absolutely. And look, I will tell you, so since I've been in-house and we've done a number of acquisitions in the past 6 years, some of the people who were involved at a target, they're now part of our family, so to speak.
Yeah.
These are some of my best friends in life.
Wow.
I mean, honestly, because you get to, in a sense, you're the front door for their entry into the company, because you're doing the deal. So you're negotiating with these folks, you're bringing them on board.
Yeah.
And they're interacting with, other people in the business, but a lot of times on the sort of lead attorney, you get to interact with these people a lot, and they get to know you.
And they
so
get to
you've
know
got
you.
to put that face forward that, hey, this is a great place to work.
So you're building like these deep, enduring relationships.
If you're doing it right, you're both being an advocate for your side of the business, but also knowing that these are going to be your colleagues one day, hopefully building that rapport with them for when they actually start.
That's fascinating. Let's talk a little bit about the company. Carmeuse, it's a name that I've become familiar with in partnering here with the team at Pittsburgh Earth Day. And then, working with you through the business breakfast and other types of activities that we've done. Maybe share with our listeners, what is Carmeuse and specifically the history, and then also the industry. I think it's a name that certain sectors of Pittsburgh are familiar with. Sure. Because of what I think you're going to tell me about in terms of history and longevity and those sorts of things. But tell us about Carmeuse.
Yeah. Carmeuse, so we're a Belgian company globally. That's where our parent is located. We're a limestone mining company, a lime manufacturing company as well. We've been in existence since 1860.
That's crazy.
And I say that sometimes, and then it's obviously it sounds like an impressive stat, but then I sort of thought about it. I mean, and truly, if you think, our country is like 80 years older than this company. That's it. That's how old it is.
That's
right?
how old it is.
So we were doing a leadership conference a couple years back, and we were in Gettysburg, and we were talking about the Civil War. And I'm like, this company is actually older than the start of the Civil War, right? By a year, but still older.
From the parent side or here?
From the parent side.
Okay.
So here in Pittsburgh, I think this has been the Americas headquarter only since the early 90s.
Okay.
And so the move into this market was through acquisition.
Okay.
So that's how we came to be, and honestly still acquiring things here in the Americas. And it's I say the Americas because it's not just the U.S. It's the U.S., Canada. We've got operations now in South America that we're looking to build on. So it's an Americas.
So Carmeuse Americas and HQ'd here in
That's
Pittsburgh.
Headquartered right here in Pittsburgh.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and it is fascinating because when you think about all the company, we're not one that comes to the top of mind.
Yeah.
And look, I think it's because if you think about who our customers are. So, look, Pittsburgh is a steel town. One of our large industries that we service is the steel industry. You cannot make steel without lime. So the players here know us well, and obviously steel is synonymous with Pittsburgh.
Right.
But I don't think you think of Carmeuse necessarily. Although look, we're catching on. Let me say that.
Yeah.
My HR department will love me for this, but I think we've been named a top place to work in Pittsburgh for several years in a row now by the Post-Gazette.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, thank you. So, I think we're proud of what we're doing here, and it is catching on.
That's awesome. What's the? Tell me about that industry. So lime and steel and heavy metals are a component. What are some of those verticals in terms of the business and markets you're involved in?
Yeah, that's a small. Well, it's a large piece of the business, but we do a lot of other things. One of the most fascinating things when I started this company, because I I'll be honest, I didn't know a lot about the lime industry
Sure.
before I started. Like,
It's not a thing that a
not
little
most
boy
people
coming
do.
out of law
No,
school
not at
is
all.
like, I'm going into the lime industry,
exactly.
right?
Well, one of the first slides, and we were actually just looking at this in a sustainability meeting yesterday, and the slide shows the different, there's like a picture that represents each of the industries where lime is used, and you'd be surprised how much a part it is of your everyday life.
Wow.
So you're drinking water,
Yep.
potentially purified with lime. I don't know where this particular water came
Right.
from, but that's certainly something we do.
Point Park is getting all their lime,
Yeah, they
all
should.
their water filtered.
I hope so.
Yeah.
If not, they should talk to me. But look, we're in construction, so we make aggregate material. So if if you're driving on a road, potentially, we're part of that as well.
Yep. We should talk.
Pulp and paper. That's
Yep.
a big part of our business. Animal feed.
Animal feed.
Exactly. So if you think about it, so chickens eat lime, right? And then the calcium from that product gets absorbed in the chicken. So think about that when you're having your omelet tomorrow and you're cracking an egg. That shell was brought to you by Carmeuse, potentially, right? Like, think about that.
So it's one of those materials, and Pittsburgh is, in some regards, like undersold for this, I think, where we are supplying the products that are the products that we interface with, right? Like, you're not hatching the egg, right? You're not the farmer, but you're providing a critical material into that agricultural project.
Yeah, no, part of that probably comes from just the ethos of what Pittsburgh is, right? This is a town that's proud, but I'm not sure we brag about it, right? I mean, people wear it on their sleeves wherever they go, because any city I've ever been in, I know where the Pittsburgh, the Steelers bar is, for example.
Yeah.
So, I mean, people are proud about where they come from, but I don't think they brag about it.
That's
so
true.
I think that's part of
the
ethos
challenge
that becomes part of it, yeah.
Do from a Carmeuse perspective, now your corporate headquarters are here, but are you also, do you have mining operations near the area, or?
We have mining operations all over the world, truly. Here, we have lots of quarries, other operations in the U.S. None of them are within Pittsburgh or, so Ohio,
So
Kentucky,
adjacent areas.
Michigan, Virginia. But here, this is really HQ.
It is, pardon my ignorance, but like the lime mining or that process, similar to coal, or in terms of like the extraction or other heavy metals? Yeah.
So look, I'm not the technical person. I think they are close. The difference is, and I've seen pictures of this to attest, I've been underground at our mines. Not deep, but I've been underground a bit.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd do that in a coal mine.
Yeah.
I think so the ceilings actually are much lower.
In the coal.
So it's a different process in that sense. I think at the end of the day, they're similar processes.
Got it.
But they look different, and I did not know I was claustrophobic, but I found out when they stuck me in an MRI tube that I am in fact claustrophobic. So I don't think I'd do it in a coal mine. But,
so the mining industry and claustrophobia,
it's fine for us. You'd be surprised when you're underground in our mines. You wouldn't even believe it,
because they're big, expansive spaces.
Correct. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so for you guys, tell me a little too, I guess, about the parent. I mean, I'm interested in that from my standpoint too. Is S&B USA where I'm at? S&B is short for Shikun and Benui, which is our parent company based in Tel Aviv, Israel.
Yeah.
So we're in the, for your benefit, we're in the infrastructure and construction space, right?
That's great.
And I've been fascinating in terms of the learnings that happen between the parent and then the U.S. based company, in terms of just the knowledge exchange and just gives you a different perspective. For sure, I think, because you're up above the parapet looking out. Yeah. Versus just looking kind of in terms of like a U.S. market. True. Does that happen with you guys also? It does.
I mean, I think in some respects that's one of our biggest challenges, because if you think about it, I looked this up yesterday because I didn't know officially off the top of my head. We're on 5 of the 7 continents, I believe, in terms of our business.
Okay.
So I think the challenge with that is you have a lot of disparate, not just cultures, but legal systems that you have to manage.
Yeah.
I think in some respects, the easiest one is probably Belgium and the U.S. I mean, Western Europe and the U.S. isn't that different. From a systems perspective, we sort of get each other.
Yeah.
Now their laws are. They do have some different laws, and frankly, in the sustainability space, I think it'd be hard to argue that Europe is not ahead of the U.S. in this respect.
Interesting.
So yeah, for sure.
So let's get into that. I mean, your sustainability journey, I mean, both personally as well as at Carmeuse, maybe if you can take it from that perspective, is it influenced from the parent company and like what's happening in Europe? Or are you guys driving it from a U.S. perspective or a little bit of both?
It's both. I mean, there are things that we in America's leadership team realize we need to do, but there's no question that on a global basis, I mean, this is something that has, if you think about it, again, we went to 1860.
Yeah.
You don't get to be here as a company for that longer period of time unless you care about sustainability.
For sure.
That's just, I mean, there's nothing that's a bigger mark of that than the fact that we've been here this long.
The enduring aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Right.
And so there's no question there's a global commitment to it, but I mean, we have a local team of people.
Yeah.
And so our sustainability group has people from all walks of the company on that team. So there's folks in the Americas who represent this part of the business, Europe, Africa, everywhere.
What are some of the, when you came to Carmeuse, was there things already in place? Or were you, kind of entrusted with starting?
Yeah, I take no credit for starting any of this stuff. I look at myself, I mean, from a sustainability perspective, I'm like, I'm hopeful that I carry the torch, right? Like I do my job during my time here. And if you think about, the interesting thing to me about sustainability is it's not a short-term thing, right? No. We're talking about, so, we'll get into this a little bit later when we talk about like our carbon goals, right? Yeah. We talk about 2050 goals. I don't, that's 27 years from now. Will I be working? I don't know. Maybe.
Right. Maybe.
Yeah. So from my perspective, this is something that existed before me.
Yep.
Will absolutely exist after me. And my job is to be the best steward of it. I mean, and to be honest, that is the sustainability.
That's the mantra.
That is it, right? So I just want to do my part while I'm here.
Do you see that too? How long have you been with Carmeuse?
Just 6 years. Yeah.
In that time frame, which is that's a good benchmark there.
Yeah.
In that time frame, what have you seen changed? Because it almost seems, my personal perspective is that there's been an acceleration.
No question.
Both in terms of like knowledge and tactics, but also just like that team aspect that you talk about. It's not about one person. Yeah. But it requires, a village and a family to kind of pull it all together. I mean, what have you seen in that 6 years?
Yeah, well, so that's what I think when you look at the ambitiousness of the goals you set. Yeah. There's no way you could ever possibly accomplish that unless you do it holistically. So if the whole company hasn't bought in, you're not going to reach those goals. Yeah. So, and to me, the big shift has been, look, I mean, some of it is obviously pressure, regulatory pressure, but I think internally this is something that, even without that pressure, we would have gotten to. The question is the technology there to make it happen? And I think from our perspective, we're hopeful anyway that we're going to be part of the leaders of that sort of technological development. So,
do you see those pressures internally as well as externally?
In terms of,
well, in terms of like, one of the things I wanted to ask you is just about like employee engagement, right? And are the internal pressures like, why can't we do this? Or why can't we go faster? Or, those sorts of things versus those regulatory pressures, whether that's an SEC regulation or shareholders or
it's absolutely a combination of the two things. I mean, I think for me, and I was thinking about this actually yesterday, in preparation for this. I don't just think about this. There's other things I think about when I'm home, I promise. But, if you think about, especially, younger people today and what their world is like for them. I'm older, I'm in my mid-40s. So I remember a time when there wasn't a computer in my pocket all times, right? Like a smartphone. Right. If you're in college today, that world doesn't exist to you. You've only known that world, right? And technology is advancing so fast. Look at the stuff that's happening with AI. And I think if you're a younger person, you sort of see that development happening at a lightning pace and you think, well, why can't we do these things tomorrow? Yep. And I think it's hard to set the expectations that, listen, we're in this, we're committed to this. This isn't going to happen tomorrow. This is something that we need to work on
over time.
Yeah, and now you have to keep the momentum up, right? So that's the push and pull, right? You can't just say, hey, we'll get to that later, because it doesn't just happen that way either. You have to develop it systematically over the long haul.
When you guys are developing your sustainability strategy, what does that look like? Is it a, you mentioned the team, and you have external and internal stakeholders. Like how's Carmeuse thinking about those things?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that, first you want to comply, right?
Yeah.
So that's always top of mind. There's some new regulations coming out of Europe. That's something that we're focused on. That's more of a short-term kind of concept. But honestly, on the longer-term side, when we talk about sort of the decarbonization efforts, the planning around that is, again, to make sure that you're always finding the right people, that you're looking for the right opportunities, whether it's a partnership with somebody so you could share technologies, or funding opportunities that exist. We actually recently announced this, so I'll give it a plug.
Yeah.
In May, we got some funding from the Department of Energy to do an engineering and design study for what we hope is a functional net zero carbon lime plant.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, it's got to be built, right?
Yeah.
But, this is where it's in process. Let's say that.
So that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So through like the loan program office at Department of Energy, or
they've put out, this is part of what's it, Build Back Better, or whatever Biden's new plan is.
Yes.
Whatever the bill was. There's a lot of money that's out there. So this was
probably the Inflation Reduction
That's
Act.
the one.
Yep.
It's the one that came right, because the Build Back Better failed.
I live in the world of acronyms.
Yeah, that's the one.
So my colleagues always hear me talking about IIJA
There
and
you go.
IRA or the Inflation Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. And
this is a real example of it working, right? You put the money out there, everyone talks about it in just huge terms, like here's $1 trillion to do whatever.
Right.
Well, there's a real impact here, because that money's going to help us do this study and potentially could lead to some real change.
But it's fascinating to me, and I was actually like you, I was thinking about this, and I do think about other things also. But just in terms of some statistics that I saw last night, and then I was letting it kind of soak in, just in terms of like the economy where we're at currently, right? And so, jobs are driving, GDP is up, inflation is down, and you look at kind of these investments that the federal government is making, and you guys, you're just kind of proving the point of what the author of this study was saying is that American manufacturing is being reinvented right in front of our eyes.
Yeah.
And you have this compounding effect, these public-private partnerships of public capital coming in, the study dollars, but then you're going to have to build a plant, right?
Absolutely.
And so, Carmeuse is going to make these investments.
Absolutely.
And then on the back end, you have carbon reduction happening, but
Correct.
you're still getting that critical material in lime getting out into the marketplace.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating to see that happen in real time.
Yeah. And look, the only scary thing is, politics is scary, right? Administrations change.
Right.
And so the scary part is, how much of your future do you want to potentially put in the hands of whoever the next administration is? But outside of that, there's real value in doing it this way.
For sure. So tying that back, you're going to build a net zero plant. What led you guys to that point to want to, develop a net zero plant? Why?
Yeah.
For the listener, I guess, why is that important for Carmeuse? And
it's an easy answer, because we've been here 160 years. And we want to be here 160 more or beyond, right?
Right.
And if you can't see that this is sort of where we're headed, it's something that needs to happen, right?
Yeah.
We all are aware, I think, at this point. Maybe there are people who aren't or deny it, but CO2 is an issue, and it's not one that's going away. And, I think you've got really two choices here. You could sort of resist it, or you can try to find a way to be part of the solution. And I think the companies that are going to be around in another 160 years are going to be the ones that are part of the solution. If you resist it, I think the tide of history is probably against you on that one.
Is that for you guys as a company? Is that like, how does that intermixing happening? Is it your sustainability team that's hanging out with your research and development team, that's with your operations team? Like, how does an idea
much more
like
organic
this?
than that, to be honest, because when I talk about a sustainability team, the interesting thing about it is we all have day jobs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's nobody who's like, there may be a couple people, but the reality is it's not like a sustainability group that's all they do.
Right.
We're engineers, we're lawyers, we're HR people, everybody pitches in. So it's
a shared
cross-functional.
responsibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is great. You need that because, anytime you want to approach any of these projects, all of those groups are going to have input. So, the sustainability is just another hat you wear.
Yep.
And you bring all the other expertise from whatever function you're in to that process. So if you're an engineer, you say, hey, here's an idea. This is something we can do. But hey, if we're going to do that, is this going to lead to some IP? Let's get the lawyer in here and talk to him about it, right? So you've got that group happening and talking about that stuff, and it's
so it's not just about emissions reduction. Like, you're looking at business competitiveness opportunities.
All of it.
How do we get stuff to market?
We also, even look, our even things like our people, right? Like one of the big things, and people don't think about this with sustainability because the environmental stuff is such a big part of it.
Yep.
But just our health and safety initiative, our zero injury initiative, the fact that we want to make sure that everybody that works in our company, again, it's a mining company, so there's risks in that business.
For sure.
We want to make sure that people are safe at work.
Right.
They go home at night, right? And they go home to their families. That's sustainable too. We work with our communities, and we have plants all over the U.S. It's a lot of local communities. We're employing people from the community, but then you also want to give back. So whether it's like, getting backpacks for kids to go back to school or whatever. To me, that's all part of the sustainability journey that we're on.
Sure.
So the carbon piece may be the most exciting piece from the technology perspective, but it's all part of the mix for us.
On that S side, do you guys look at, the S, the social in ESG? I always try to explain to people that's about it's S, but it's really about people.
Yeah, it's the most.
Right.
It's the least controversial aspect of it, I think.
Right. I hope
it should be.
For your employees, and you mentioned safety, which you coming from the construction industry, that's paramount, right?
Absolutely.
Because, I think of a guy on our HR team, Alan Gemmel. He explained to me when I first started the company, we work with industrial athletes. And I was like, oh, that's catchy. I was like, you should tell marketing about that.
I'm actually going to use that.
You
Thank
should. You. Yeah, Alan Gemmel, HR at S&B USA, credit him. But like the idea is that health and wellness component, safety, because we're putting people in challenging positions. Mental health is a huge issue. Chris Reefer, our safety director, talks about that a lot, because if you're not your best on that day, should you be operating heavy equipment? Should you be flagging traffic? We're putting people in very challenging situations.
For sure.
Same in the mining. Like, what's that employee engagement side look like? In terms of making sure that we're supporting both our people, the folks that work at Carmeuse or S&B, but also like our communities. Like, how do you guys approach that?
I think we approach it by we focus an attention on it, and then we commit resources to it. That's what you have to do. So, for example, we talk about health and safety. We have a zero injury initiative. That's a company-wide thing. So, it is something that we don't just sort of market and talk about it. We have folks from the health and safety team, folks from all walks of the company who, when they're on site, you want to talk about that with the employees that you come across. What are you doing to make sure that this is a zero injury site? We celebrate people when so our sites that have had zero injuries, they're going to get recognition for that, because it's important, because you want to make sure that if people are doing the right things, they're getting recognized for it, so they want to continue to do those things in the right way.
That they're reinforcing that behavior.
For sure. And you talked about wellness. It's a great point, because people don't think about that aspect of health, right? Which is like, do you eat right? When are you working out? Like, you don't want somebody to be not just mentally unhealthy, but physically unhealthy. Those are important things. And so, even our our benefits programs are tied to giving people points. We have, we work with a third party that helps sort of put together, a system of rewards for doing the right things and engaging in the right behavior, because you want to focus, if you can, because it's the easiest thing in many ways for people to just forget about, right?
Right.
Like, I didn't have breakfast this morning, right? Whatever, it's hard to start your day healthy when you've got a million things. So it's just one more way to hopefully engage with people and make them understand that we're thinking about it as a company and we care about those things.
And thinking about them.
And
right?
we're investing in it. I mean, these aren't free. These are things you have to invest time and money into.
For sure.
And it's, hopefully for the benefit of people.
Is that because you're in so many different places, both here in the U.S., but also in Europe, and you mentioned South America, how did those cultural country differences kind of play in some of those aspects of it?
It's the oddest thing. I have yet, and I've now been to Europe, I've been to South America, been to Canada. I guess I haven't been to every part of the business yet. The cultural differences really fade.
Really?
It's odd because, there may be a different approach to some things, but when it comes to things like, safety or wellness, I think there's a Carmeuse sort of bias that sort of overlays whatever cultural differences there are, right? Because we have it's a sort of a one company approach to these things.
So no matter what country or state you're in, there's a Carmeuse culture?
Yes. So in other words, even if you're in Tunisia, you're going to know, hey, this site is focused on zero injuries for its people.
Injuries.
You're going to be focused on the wellness of your employees. We're going to be focused on whatever, decarbonization efforts, right? So that permeates all of it. So to me, that helps, that sort of, and look, I think we're a family company. This isn't a public company. So it's an easier sell because it sort of feels like we're all part of the same family.
I was going to ask that, because you're not publicly traded.
No, we're not. No.
So family-owned company.
Yeah.
And does that, with that type of endurance, is even more fascinating.
Yes, generationally, yes.
Generationally. Does it still maintain, or as you've grown, how do you still maintain that family company feel?
Yeah, I think through effort. That's the only way to do it. You have to remind people, I guess, a little bit. But also, look, we're just a nice place to work. Yeah. And that just sort of comes across. And the pressures are different. I've represented public companies. I've been in a public company for a little bit. They're, they just have a different set of expectations.
Right.
And obviously it comes with reporting and worrying about sort of what does the street think of what we're doing with this. We could sort of, put a lot of that noise in the background and focus on how do we do this better.
Yeah.
Right?
Does that give, as a private company, from a sustainability standpoint, does that give you a little bit more agility? It
does. In a sense, but it also, the flip side to that, I think, or the challenge would be, you also have probably less pressure from the outside.
Yeah.
People don't, so if you're going to do a good job, it's got to come from within.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to have the same external pressures that a public company might, because you have to report about these things, talk about these things.
Yep.
And I think, obviously, in Europe, they figured this out.
Yeah.
Because there's some new reporting requirements coming out of there that will affect public and private companies alike.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I think they've sort of figured out that if we shine the spotlight, it'll make everybody be a better actor.
You guys have been, to lead into that for a second, like you've looked at frameworks like the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, right? Talk about the importance of those frameworks for you as a private company. Yeah. Whether it's the SDGs, or I'm not sure if you use like CDP or Carbon Disclosure Project for not to acronym people to death or anything like that, but how are you using those frameworks?
Yeah, I think, look, these are organizations that have large budgets. They have a lot of smart people that can think about these things, and
private companies.
No, the United Nations. I'm talking about the companies that are putting out these guidelines, right? So to me, the way you use it is you sort of piggyback on their work and their expertise. And you say, okay, hey, these are 17 great goals. Maybe we would have came up with the same 17 if we did this on our own. Maybe we would have came up with only half of them. Yep. But, why reinvent the wheel when this is there? Yep. And so, we've looked at those goals, and I mentioned to you earlier, but of the 17 goals that exist, 9 of them are ones we focused on where we think we could really impact these 9 areas. And so that becomes part of our sustainability sort of journey.
And it's interesting too. Like I've worked with the Sustainable Development Goals, both in the public sector and now in the private sector. And to that point, I think what's been great about them is that they are a little apple pie,
Of course.
And there's nerds out there or professionals, excuse me, that will drive down and give you SDG 16 2.5, and there's definitely like value, I think, in that tracking space. But just as an organizing principle.
That's right.
Because we've gone through a similar exercise with our ESG committee, and it helps everybody see where they're connected. Yeah. And it's like, climate action. Okay, I get that. That's the environmental folks, But then when you're looking at, economic development or in advancement of industry, they're like, oh yeah, that's us,
And I think it also helps you with developing metrics, KPIs, things that you could track. So, because you do need a standard. Otherwise, you just say, hey, we do great in sustainability. How do you know?
Are you at that point in your process where you have KPIs established?
That is the process. That's really, I think, where we're at in our journey is establishing these.
Yeah.
I mean, we have some, but I think in the next, I would say 18 months, that is going to be a huge focus of our group, is to develop those.
And that's, is that an opportunity? I wanted to get into this. Is that an opportunity or a challenge?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I mean, it's challenging because it doesn't exist. So you're inventing it from scratch. That's always a challenge.
Yep.
But to me, it's an opportunity, right? Obviously, it's because these are the things that we're going to say, okay, this is what we want to accomplish.
Yep.
This is how we're going to measure it. And hopefully when we measure it, we're living up to the standards we're setting.
If you can't measure you can't manage
That's the opportunity right there.
Yeah.
So I think we look at it as both for sure.
What are some things that you guys are looking at? Like obviously, like with a net zero plant in the future is like carbon reduction.
That's always going to be a big part of it for us for sure. But
what are some others?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the people side, sort of like I said, the injuries will be a part of it.
Safety,
how are we doing in terms of safety of our employees? Just in terms of touch points with the community, I think that's always going to be a big thing. So, we work with a lot of local charities. I mean, that's a harder thing to track, but I think you can do it in terms of hours or dollars. I mean, there's ways to track, like how are we impacting the communities in which we live?
Right.
But there's other things too we've sort of talked about, just in terms of, for us as a mining company, people think, well, you're extracting these minerals and then there's like a hole in the ground. Well, what do you do with that?
What do you do with that?
There are ways to reclaim that. And so, what kind of measurement can we have about how we leave sites when we're done with them?
Interesting. So really thinking forward in terms of your impact on the environment, how you leave things within a community.
I can honestly say that those are things we think that is always something we've thought of since the day I got here. This isn't like a new thing. It's not part of sustainability. I think it's part of our culture and it's part of the family's view of how the world should be, right?
Interesting.
I mean, if you think about it, in 160 years, we've made money mining resources from the earth, right?
Yep.
If you don't care about the earth, that's a bad business to be in.
Right.
Because
because that's your business.
Correct.
The earth is your business.
Yes, absolutely. So you have to think about those things. And so I think that's always been part of our culture.
How has it been too with, you're both a critical supplier to industries, like we mentioned steel and agriculture earlier in the conversation, but you guys also have your own suppliers.
Yeah.
What does that relationship, both up the chain and down the chain, look like for Carmeuse?
Yeah. Well, look, I think, in terms of in specifically sustainability, I will say that what I'm finding is everybody is now interested, and I think it's partly, it's knowledge sharing, right? They're interested in what are you doing?
Yep.
And sometimes you'll see people say, hey, here's our sustainability journey. Here's what our path looks like. What do you have on that? Can you share that with us? And so I think part of it is to make sure that your goals are aligned.
Yep.
Like you want to do business with somebody whose goals you respect, understand. I mean, you don't want to do business with a stranger who's
right.
But I think also it's an opportunity to go, hey, these guys are doing this. That looks pretty cool. Maybe we can adopt that idea.
It's interesting that literally just happened to me this past week.
Yeah.
Where we were doing some work with Duquesne Light. So we do a lot of utility work here in the city. And we were at their supplier conference 2 weeks ago, and then we're doing work with Duquesne Light, and alongside of us is Burns and McDonnell, who's a engineering, procurement, construction, or EPC company, and they contacted us with regards to their carbon disclosure project report.
Oh, that's great.
And it wasn't until I couldn't get into the system, but now I'm into the system, so like that heartburn was relieved. But like it led to a further conversation with Burns and Mac in terms of like, hey, we're thinking about climate adaptation programming, and we know that you guys are working on this project in Fargo, North Dakota. And so like, it's just this domino effect of just because of that reporting that it led into a business conversation and thinking about some new strategies. And,
for sure.
That's one of the things that's fascinating, I think, in this space is that catalytic capabilities.
Well, listen, I mean, I'm going to drop a promo for your show here, but this is a good reason even to do something like this, right? Yeah. So at the breakfast, I met people I didn't know. I mean, there are other professionals in the city, but you're focused on your own company.
Great.
And we don't necessarily have a relationship. It's not a vendor, not a supplier, but just having that crosstalk, I realized, hey, there might be actually be an opportunity to work together. And so I talked to one of the panelists, and we actually, now I don't know what's going to come of it, but we've had several conversations about potentially recycling materials and using waste products in our systems. I'm like, this is great, and the only way to do that is to share and to get the word out that, hey, this is what we're doing. And maybe that spurs somebody else to think, hey, maybe I should talk to them about that.
There it is. I appreciate that quick promo for the Earth Day Business Breakfast. So if you haven't bought your tickets yet, make sure you talk to the team at Earth Day Pittsburgh about that. Just coming up against time here, Nick, and this is just a terrific conversation. One of the things I wanted to end with is just learning, in addition to, St. John's winning the national championship of basketball.
God, that'd be my dream come true.
I could see that on Lou Carnesecca's 100th birthday. I think we'll make it happen. I don't know when.
Now you're teasing me.
I don't know when Lou's birthday is. But, it's like the end of March in 2024. Just imagine that. I can see that happening.
I can.
What are some of the the near term action steps that are just kind of up ahead for you and Carmeuse and your sustainability journey?
There's a lot of them. Like I said, I'm actually glad that we're having this today because yesterday was our sustainability steerco meeting.
Awesome.
So we talked about a lot of these sort of near term.
So you're hot. You're
I'm ready.
up.
I know it.
It's like being in the bullpen for the Earth Day podcast.
I mean, in the very near term, as I said, Europe has some standards coming out in terms of reporting. The CSRD requirements. And so we, as a company in the near term, need to figure out how are we going to address that reporting. And, the interesting thing about a lot of this stuff is, and I don't think people realize, this stuff is going to matter beyond just that it's important for the earth. It's going to matter from a business perspective.
For sure.
Because it's not like you report and say, hey, we're doing a good job or terrible job, and that doesn't mean anything. It means something. It means people may think that you're a great place to work or not. And job market's still tight. So if you want to be able to attract talent, you have to be a company that demonstrates that, hey, look, we're doing a really good job at this. Go look at our report. We're one of the good guys, so to speak. One of the things we were talking about is, I mean, even if you look at how you finance a business, banks are under a lot of pressure, and they will change the way they underwrite financing. So if you're not a good steward of the environment, if you don't have a sustainability plan in place, and they view that as risky,
right,
that becomes almost part of your credit profile. Now you're borrowing at higher interest rates. I mean, these are things that truly impact the business. So I think in the near term is developing those sort of KPIs and metrics, so that make sure that we're we think we're doing the right things, but to make sure that we are, and if we're not, how do you course correct? Because you sort of see where you're not quite, meeting expectations. So I think that to me is the biggest short-term goal.
Awesome.
And obviously the long-term goal is, we're going to be carbon neutral in 2050, right? That's a great long-term goal, and I think it's achievable. I mean,
with the advancements of technology, and I think you're talking about investment. Those are all things that it is achievable.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think we're in a technology problem right now. We're in a procurement and speed problem, right?
That is the biggest problem, for sure.
So, excellent. We'll leave it right there. Nick Bonarrigo from Carmeuse. I appreciate you and the work that you're doing. And it's great to have a company like Carmeuse here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, appreciate the time. This is great.
Awesome. So thank you. Thanks to Nick, and thanks to the folks at Carmeuse, and thanks to the team here at Point Park University and the Pittsburgh Earth Day team. Thanks for listening to the Green Voice podcast, where you can get all the dirt on sustainability here in Pittsburgh. I'm your host, Grant Ervin with S&B USA. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.